Hello once again, watchers of good movies. My name is Nick Pell, and this is my spoiler-filled review of The Incredibles 2. So, that kind of goes without saying, I would presume, but I'm going to say it anyway. This review will contain spoilers of the entirety of The Incredibles 2, the sequel to The Incredibles, which just came out. So, if you have not seen the film, which is very likely because the film just came out, and I am likely posting this on either Thursday night or Friday morning. Probably don't watch this if you care about spoilers at all to any degree. If you don't care about spoilers, or in the other event that you have actually seen the film by now, feel free to continue. But that said, you have been warned, and let's dive into this thing. Now, before I start talking about my issues with the film, which is primarily what this review is going to pretty much be, I do want to just preface it with saying I did enjoy the film for what it was. I had a good time with it. I laughed a fair amount, and you can see all that stuff in my spoiler-free review, which I'll link at the end of this video. But the film just had enough issues or things which I thought could have been better that I just felt like making a video talking about it and going into those in more detail. So starting off with the beginning of the film, as I mentioned in my spoiler-free review, we get to basically see what takes place directly after the events of The Incredibles, with the Underminer emerging and our family of heroes going after him to try to take him down. The Underminer fight itself worked fine. I really enjoyed it as a whole, honestly, and I thought it was a really good way to start the film and kind of introduce a central theme that is still going on with heroes still being outlawed in society. That said, once the Underminer escapes, he's gone for the rest of the film. We never see any sort of like follow-up to that. He gets away with the money and everything of that sort. We never see anything else take place in regards to that. And so I felt like that was a little bit strange that he just gets away, never seen again. He could be off to the Bahamas spending all his stolen cash for all we know. It just seemed really strange to have that plot point in there, have him get away, and then just never really follow it up. But shortly after those events, we have the family. They're in a motel for about 2 weeks until they have to basically decide to get new jobs because they can't support themselves being superheroes anymore. They get invited to the CEO company of this guy, voiced by Bob Odenkirk, who I really enjoyed in the film. Basically trying to get Elastigirl to be the new spokeswoman for supers, essentially, and basically become a vigilante on his dime to bring supers back into the limelight. And essentially, when I first saw these people introduce him and then his sister, I presumed that they were going to be the villains of the film, because in almost every film of this sort, whenever you have this giant corporation try to do essentially or seemingly something good right off the bat, they do tend to end up being the villains with some maniacal scheme in the background. And with the sister, when it was revealed that she was the villain, that kind of took me by surprise. I was assuming that it was going to be Bob Odenkirk's character, honestly. So, I mean, the fact that it was one of them, it made sense to me. But I was expecting it to be the guy rather than the sister, just honest. And so I guess I'll follow that up with the issue that I have with the villains themselves of this film. And the idea of like hypnotizing Elastigirl and eventually Mr. Incredible and Frozone and the other minor superheroes that are included in this film, it's fine for what it is, but I think that a more interesting plot that they could have done with that is still have like Elastigirl get hypnotized, really speed up that plot line, have her do like one heroic thing, get hypnotized, maybe not have to wear the goggles or whatever, but just have some other form of hypnosis instead, just to kind of be controlling her somehow, and then have her essentially be the stand-in villain of the movie and just have her doing these crimes on screen. That brings together Mr. Incredible, Violet, Dash, Jack to have to basically stop her. That would have been a lot more interesting of a plot line, because it's like, how far do you go when someone that you love is essentially the villain of the film? And then also with the underutilized basically superheroes that they use, they introduce them very briefly and then they get them hypnotized and then they're basically kind of villains for the rest of the movie. It would have been a lot more interesting if they just started out as this like secret villain society with the idea of once Elastigirl is kind of acting as vigilante, it decides to bring out all these other supervillains of sorts, and maybe Buddy initiates that somehow. Basically, his presence basically inspires the villains to come out of hiding, kind of like how in the general Batman arc and theme, once Batman is introduced to Gotham, all the villains kind of amp up their tactics and become supervillains to match him. With the first different plot point with Elastigirl being hypnotized and the family had to basically stop her, that would have also helped to basically utilize Violet and Dash a lot more, because I felt like they were also very underutilized, and a lot of the first hour of the film just honestly felt like filler material. It was funny at some points, and like I said in my other review, I like the fact that we got to see Mr. Incredible in this single father position, essentially, had to take care of the family, take on all these responsibilities, help Violet with relationships, help Dash with homework, take care of Jack as a baby, all that stuff. It worked fine for what it was, but honestly, it just kind of felt like filler at the end of the day. While Elastigirl is doing all this heroic stuff, it just didn't really seem that overall exciting, like I said, compared to the MCU, the DC films, every other superhero film which is really out there. I also felt like Edna was a little bit underutilized, as far as I can tell from people that have heard talk about the original Incredibles film. She is probably one of the best parts of that film, just because of how witty she is and just how funny her character is overall. I thought that she was a fun part of the film. I just wish she was included a little bit more. Maybe the actress just didn't have a lot of time to voice dialogue, or they just didn't decide to include her as much in this film for some reason. But she was someone who I really enjoyed when she was on screen, and just ended up feeling like we didn't see as much of her as we maybe should have. And then the last little bit that I want to address really quick is that maybe like half an hour into the film, when Elastigirl was trying to track down the main villain, whose name I don't even really remember, he was basically doing his televised voiceover thing, and he's basically saying that the reason that he's trying to do all this stuff is because society has become so hooked on screens and technology, and we're reproducing human emotion through like reality TV and really crap TV shows and things of that sort, and it's replacing basic relationships and things which would be unheard of like 50 years ago, before all this technology and modern day era stuff like phones and cable TV and reality TV and all that stuff came into being. And so I thought that was a little bit interesting, and it would have made for an interesting way to follow up the film. But once the actual villain is exposed as being the sister, that all just kind of flies out the window. It's never really addressed again, as far as I remember it being. And it really just seemed to make the villain's motivations kind of empty as a result, and like I said, just made the villain themselves just not that terribly interesting. Because one thing which made Buddy really compelling is the fact that he actually did things for a compelling reason, and you could kind of see the morals, or at least the logic behind what he was trying to do. With this villain, they're just kind of purely evil for the sake of being evil, and their motivations, well, I kind of understand where they're coming from. They're just not nearly as compelling or relatable or sensible, I guess, as the other villains that I've seen. So yeah, in a nutshell, those were kind of the main issues which I had with the movie itself. Like I said before, really enjoyed it overall for the most part. Just had minor issues with it I didn't really want to bring up in the actual review, because I feel like they would be going into more spoiler territory. But to kind of sum it up, I wish that they would have gone with a kind of more dark story, or at least a more interesting story. Do something kind of more unique, because it was just a plot which I honestly could not just really get into. Like I said, the bit with Mr. Incredible being the father figure and everything like that, that was probably the more compelling element, even though at the end of the day, it did kind of feel like filler once we got to the latter half of the film, have him and his wife hypnotized, and have the kids having to kind of go and save the day. They didn't even have to really fight their parents that much. They just kind of used Jack to get the goggles off of the mom, and then everyone pretty much got saved one after the other. And it just seemed like a very easy win overall. And even if they had kind of played into that plot even a little bit more, if that had shown up a little bit sooner, have Mr. Incredible and Elastigirl be hypnotized, have the kids have to basically find a way to stop their parents, who are these trained superheroes and they have these amazing abilities, have to utilize their powers in a way that can stop their parents. That would have been a lot more interesting, I think. And even Jack stuff, like I said in my other review, we are so focused on seeing him develop his powers and seeing the different things that he's capable of doing, that none of that was really fully utilized at the end of the film, except for like the laser eyes, which were used to take down the hawk guy or the owl guy or whatever. Outside of that, he wasn't really a huge asset to the film. Like, it kind of built him up to being like maybe the key to solving this whole dilemma, and he just really wasn't utilized as well as I was hoping. Hey guys, that is my spoiler review of The Incredibles 2. Let me know your comments on it down below. Did you not have as many issues with the film as I did? Did you have more than I did? Voice them all in the comments. I would love to hear them and discuss them with you. Sure, like, favorite, comment, and subscribe. As always, I'd very much appreciate it. And as always, my name is Nick Pell. And once again, keep on watching.